Welcome to the Strategy Skills podcast. I'm your host, Chris Safarova, and today we have with us a very special guest, L. David Marquet, who is a former nuclear submarine commander, Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Turn the Ship Around, now introducing his fourth book called Distancing. David, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show, Chris, and welcome all listeners.
Such an incredible background. I would love to start with your story, especially the part about being a nuclear submarine commander. Can you share a little bit with us?
Yeah, so I was a nuclear submarine commander. Well, when I grew up, our countries weren't friendly with each other, and so I went down the path. I was a geek and sort of quiet, introverted, but math, science-focused person. And the place you go if you want to go in the military is the submarines, because those are the geekiest of the geeks. And when I went into the submarines, they taught me that leadership meant making good decisions and getting the team to do them. So it was about you being smart, you figuring things out, and then you getting the team to go along with you and to put all their energy into whatever your idea was. Now, sure, we had we sprinkled fairy dust of empowerment. Say, well, it's good to know what your team thinks too. But mostly, if you want to be good, you got to make good decisions. And I was really good at this. And so I kind of rose up through the ranks, and I got sent to places that needed help. And through seeing, don't do it this way, do it this. Oh, we need to do this. And I got rewarded and promoted, and my team got pat on the back. And then they say, oh, you're going to be a submarine commander. And at the very last minute, after all my training, they shifted me to a submarine that was the worst morale, worst performance, but it was a different kind of submarine I'd ever been on. It was one of the newest in the fleet. So now, and everything changed. The physics and the theory was the same, but the way the submarine operated, the equipment, the reactor plant, we had missiles I never was, quote, trained on. And so you show up as the captain to fix the worst submarine in the fleet, and all this, I'm going to tell people what to do, is not going to work. And intellectually, you know it, but your whole body, you're just tuned to, as a submarine commander, to give orders, and the crew is tuned to follow orders. And on the first day that we went to sea, we submerged. I gave a bad order, couldn't be done. No one got hurt, nothing got damaged. But the sailor just kind of shrugged and said, "We can't do that on this submarine. It doesn't have that setting." And so it really rocked me back. And I made a deal never to give any more orders. I said, that's the last order I'm going to give, because when you give orders, when you tell people what to do, then it gives them a pass on thinking. And we bemoan as leaders. We say, oh, I wish my team would think more. Oh, I wish I'd hear their ideas. And we truly want to hear their ideas, but then we immediately go back into, oh, my job is to make things happen. And so therefore the best way to do it is for me to tell them what to do. And oh, by the way, I can see better. I can see further out on the horizon, whatever the reason. And then we go back into that, and then we shut down their thinking. And so that worked really, really well. And we got really good. So step one was I stopped giving orders. Step two was the officers would come to me not saying, well, I'd like permission to do this, because then I would still say, okay, I'd like permission to submerge the ship. Then I would say, submerge the ship. So that's still an order. So they would say, Captain, I intend to submerge the ship. And I would say, okay. And I would just sit there with my cup of coffee, and then they would just do it because they already told me that they were going to do it. And I could ask questions and stop them. But every once in a while, an officer would come to me and say, hey, I intend to, like the engineer would come and say, hey, I intend to do this. And I was like, man, that is a crappy plan. It's a good plan for engineering, but it's a crappy plan for the submarine as a whole. And one day I was tired, and I was like, I just don't want to deal with this. And then, so I said, stay here for a minute. And I went down, got a cup of coffee, came back, and I said, hey, if you were me, what would you do? Actually, I asked him, I said, hey, when I come back, I'm going to ask you this. So he was kind of thinking about it. And I come back and said, if you were me, how would you handle the situation? And I come back, and like the words coming out of his mouth are totally different. He didn't have time to talk to anyone. He didn't have time to look anything up. There was no new information, but just because he thought about it from the perspective of not him, his mind was open up. And then I started asking different questions. Like I would say, hey, if you could talk to yourself, your 6 month in the future self, let's look at a calendar. And I actually had a calendar that was a paper calendar that was always set 6 months in the future. So if it's the 1st of August, we say, okay, it's the 1st of whatever, February. And I say, hey, it's 1st of February. Now you get to talk to your future self, and your future self is going to tell you what to do now. What do you think they're going to say? And of course, the future self wants to solve the problem. You just want to get through today. So you just say, oh, I got to deal with this. And you're captured by all your previous conceptions and all your previous decisions. And so that's getting out of yourself is so powerful because it clarifies reality. And I hear people talk about, oh, we need to be more self-aware as leaders. And there's this sort of sense of, oh, I need to go deeper into myself. Well, that's the opposite. If you want to be self-aware, you need to ask a friend, hey, how did I seem in that meeting? Oh, you were tense. Oh, you barked at Chris. Like, I didn't bark. Yeah, you did. You kind of did. Because those people outside you can see you more accurately. But the thing that's really magical is just by us imagining ourselves as not us and then looking back at ourselves in imagination, it also drops that. And we start the book with a story, a strategy decision that Intel had to make back in the 80s. And so at this point, Andy Grove and Gordon Moore were running Intel. They were rich and famous because Intel was growing. They made memory chips. And it was obvious to everybody, their customers, most of the team, and even to them, in a sense, that memory chips are being commoditized. And in fact, the company posted a loss in 83. But they had this little tiny thing called a 4004 microprocessor. They weren't a microprocessor company. And they had to make this decision, do we shift to microprocessors? But because their identity was, we're memory chip makers. Not in an overt way, but their brains just couldn't handle the idea that what we've done over the last 2 decades to make ourselves rich and famous and build this wonderful company is no longer working. Their brains just kept trying to convince them. And so Grove's writing about it in his book, Only the Paranoid Survive. And he says, look, for a year, we were futzing around. And we couldn't do it. Our identity was memory chips. We just couldn't give up memory chips. And finally, one day, he's sitting in the office and he tells the story. He says, I look out the window far away. So this is key. So we're anchoring distance. Distance is like visually. And he says, if we got fired and replaced by 2 other people to run the company, what would they do? And Moore immediately says, well, they'd shift to microprocessors, obviously. And so, well, why don't we do with that? Why does this work? It's because all those past accumulated decisions and perceptions and everything, your brain now goes, it says, oh, that must be right. And it wants to make you feel good about yourself. So it's going to reject the evidence that, hey, not necessarily they were wrong. Maybe they were, but it's just like the world isn't like that anymore. And so we all know companies where they stuck too long. And we all know situations where hikers, they were getting close to Everest and they should turn around. They set a time, but they didn't. They said, we're so, they keep going and then they die. And it's all because of this, because our brains are trying to make us consistent with our past. And so you got to get out of yourself and distance.
Do you remember when you started using distancing for your own career?
Yeah. So I tended to be I think I was victim to this. Well, not really victim, but I was definitely a prime candidate for helping me. I would feel, for example, we have a lot of inspections, and during these inspections, people are going to judge you. They're going to give your submarine a grade. They're going to give you a grade, personal grade, and it's brutal. And I would feel, I use the word performative now. I would feel like I needed to perform. I needed to do good. So in sports, it's like, oh, I need to run the 440 or 400 meter. I used to run 400 meter track. I need to get around the track as fast as possible. And in that performative mindset, I felt stress. I felt pressure. I felt self-conscious. My heart rate would kind of be elevated. I might have sweaty palms. My breathing would be shallow, and my vision would become myopic. I would just sort of be locked into my head. And it was really late. It was while I was the captain of the submarine, and I just said, because we had this big inspection coming up, and I'd done this thing on the submarine where I decided not to give any orders, and so this was going to be sort of a big report card on how did this even work, and was I going to get fired, or who knows? I didn't think we would, because there were a lot of indications it was going really well. But I cast myself in the future, and I said, well, how am I going to think about this in 6 months? And I said, this is a great learning opportunity, because during these inspections, you get to do all kinds of things that you don't normally do. You get to shoot missiles and exercise torpedoes. They have dummy warheads. And you get to take your submarine through all kinds of radical maneuvers. And you have these experienced submariners there, and they're standing with clipboards, writing down all these notes. But they're also a source of, and I was like, man, we're going to learn a lot. It's going to be so much fun. The guys on my crew thought I was crazy. This was the night before. Normally it's super stressful. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, think about, like, we get to do this and this and this. You get to do these, there's a certain maneuver that puts a lot of stress on the propeller, and you can only do it a couple times a year. You have to keep track every time you do it. We're going to do this crash back, and we're going to all this cool stuff. And I just remember standing there in the control room the night before. Normally I would have been kind of like, I hope everyone does good, and I hope they don't make a mistake. And there was this sort of sense of like childlike excitement and curiosity, and my heart rate was low, and I was calm, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is amazing. Well, how come I only figured this out at this point in my life?
This is such a perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing it. So you describe in the book, you and your co-author, how ego filters perception before it even reaches consciousness, awareness. How should leaders train themselves to detect when they are being misled by their own curated reality? Yeah.
So I wrote the book with Mike Gillespie, Professor Michael Gillespie. He's got a PhD in psychology. So there's science in the book, I can assure you, lots of good science. So there's a study in Canada several decades ago. So, these are nice people, where they ask husband and wives, and they separated them, and they ask them independently, how much of the housework do you do? What percentage of the housework do you do? And they write down, and they had to pick a number. And if you add the two numbers, you can guess it added up to more than 100%. So how could it be more than 100%? Well, because people overestimate their contribution. Why? Because I know when I emptied the dishwasher, I know when I took out the trash. And even though I come and I see, oh, the trash barrels are out, my wife must have taken them out. And I might say, hey, thanks. It just, in your brain, it just doesn't register as strongly as strong as signals when you do it. And so your brain is naturally increasing the stuff that you do and reducing the stuff that other people do. And so you think you're contributing more than you are. And it's not, you don't need to be a bombastic egotist, and you don't need to be a bad person. It's just, this is how human beings are wired. So what you want, and there are times when this gets worse. Anytime you're under pressure, anytime you feel time pressure, anytime you feel like it's very public, anytime you feel like you're in a performance, like maybe you're the CEO doing a quarterly investor call, or doing your quarterly earnings call, and things didn't go quite as well as the market expects, then you're going to feel, it's going to I'm going to get some hard questions here or something like that. And so any of those moments. And now what happens is you start getting more and more immersed. And as soon as you become immersed, you kind of collapse back into this perspective where everything is here and everything's so important to me. And you spilled coffee on me and cut me off in traffic. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And there's a great scene. If you want to see this in action, There's a scene where a couple years ago at the Oscars, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway announced the wrong movie. It has all the hallmarks. First of all, it's performative. They're not there to, oh, let's see what we can learn here tonight at the Oscar ceremony. It's like performance. They're actors, so that comes kind of naturally. And it's very public. There's this. It's not only the viewers on camera, but there's this whole theater full of anyone at Hollywood is sitting out there, so you see him, and he sees they get the card for Best Actress accidentally, not Best Picture, and you could see him kind of struggling. He looks in the envelope a couple times. It's like, well, what do I do? But he's collapsing. His brain is collapsing into how does this affect me? Not how does it affect the Oscars or the crews of the cast and crew of the movies or Faye or anybody else. And in that me moment, the best thing to do is just go along with the show. Because I don't want to be someone who raises the hand and says, oh, let's see if there's a problem. I see something unusual. Let's cut the commercial. Even though we all know how simple is that. It's not scary. You're in Hollywood. There's no one trying to sink you. The ocean's not trying to cause your submarine to implode. The enemy's not shooting torpedoes at you. It's just Hollywood. But our brains process it like this. And inside that immersed self, he's like, no. And he gives it to Faye and she reads it and it's wrong. It's very embarrassing and that kind of thing. But it's classic human psychology. And so those are the moments when you want to step away and say, okay, let's call. The first thing is let's call timeout. We got to stop the clock, basically. And one of the metaphors we use in the book is be your own coach. And so your coach, if for me, swimming, or you playing piano, you do a little piece. For me, I swim down and back. Says, okay, stop. I need your arms entering a little too close. I need you to, when you enter okay, try it again. And so your coach is the one who's stopping. So you want to be your coach at that moment.
And I actually have used a lot of what you guys wrote about in a book throughout my life, and it is incredibly effective. And similar to you, I would discover something for myself and I would think, why did I not realize that I should do it earlier? Because it's so powerful. However, sometimes in very difficult situations, under a lot of stress, it's easy to forget what is happening.
Yeah.
What is the best way for leaders once they realize that they can use distancing and all kinds of approaches you guys share in your book to help them make better decisions? What can they do in very difficult situations when it's easy to forget?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One is you can make it a habit. So this is a very simple thing, but if you keep a journal, which I think is a good practice, typically we'll say, hey, David had a good day. David's nervous about filming this thing tomorrow, whatever. And so I'm writing in my journal as, well, I would say I'm doing this. I had eggs for breakfast. So you're writing in first person. That's an immersed person. But if you shift to say, well, David did this, or let's say you're coming up to an evaluation where your boss is going to give you, quote, feedback. And that's also a situation where people tend to get defensive and they regress. A team retrospective where we have to evaluate how we did. And so you're coming up to this and you're kind of thinking through it. Then shift it to third person. Oh, the product team. Don't say my team, because my team makes it more, it elevates the weight of me. So, the product team. David's having this evaluation. I wonder what he's going to learn from it. And so you're writing. And if you do that regularly, you can kind of do this, basically this temporary, you jump out. You're like, oh, well, people come up to me after a speech and someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? Well, I can tell you after a speech, I don't really want your feedback right there. I mean, theoretically, of course, I love feedback. So I say, yeah, David loves feedback right then. So, but the other thing is, if you can get a friend. I would gave the guys on the submarine these little yellow cards like the soccer referees have. And they hold the card. And I would say, you can't say, hey, if I'm just acting like a jerk, yellow card me. But if something specific, like if I don't, I would work on different things. If I'm not listening to you, if you don't think I'm listening to you and you're just getting ready to say the next thing, yellow card me. If I give you an order, that's where we started. If I give you an order, I want you to yellow card me because I made a decision not to give orders because I know the impact of that downstream. Yellow card me. So you get this external perspective and you say, hey, if I start talking faster, if I start jumping in right at the end of your sentence because I'm so eager to say the very next thing, but then these are all symptoms. But again, when it's in me, it's hard to see. So I say, hey, if you see me doing this, then yellow card me. Now, you don't always have that person. So the next best thing is to understand the situations where you're likely to be triggered like this. I live in Florida and I ride my bike there. And there's some not great moments where we had these big cars and these big pickup trucks, these big windows. And we had, I ride with a group on Saturday and this truck went by with this window and it went, and you could feel the air. And I just try and be cool. But the guy in front of me was like, well, you don't want to do that when a guy is driving a 6,000-pound truck and you're riding a 20-pound bicycle. That is a bad play. So I just had to give him a quick lesson on distancing. But in those moments, hey, I got cut off. Hey, someone spilled. Hey, someone talked badly about me. Hey, I just got someone just gave my book a 1-star review. Hey, but that's the moment when you don't want to make any decisions. Step away from the keyboard.
Very true. Do you feel that there are dangers in taking it too far?
Yeah, that is really interesting. There's examples we talk in the book about different people talking about themselves. So this idea is called Iliism, this idea of writing in your journal, David. And for example, you probably remember Simone Biles at the Tokyo Olympics got the twisties. Her body wasn't reacting correctly, and she comes off the I think it was one of the vaults, and she comes off the platform. And she's kind of talking to herself. She says, "Come on, Simone, we're not gonna do this," or something like that. But she talks to herself using her name, so she applies this to herself. So this is good for yourself. But if you go around work talking about yourself in the third, people are like, well, David, so. It could be overused, and we're not suggesting that you spend your life in this distanced state. Your default state is to experience life from you immersed in the here and now. You're running along a trail in Switzerland, and there's a big drop off. You don't want to be distanced. You want to be right there. You want to be looking for the next rock where you're going to stick your foot. So most of the time it's fine, but you just need to pick those critical moments when you're making a decision, when you feel stressed, when you're reliving a past traumatic event, when you're thinking about what you should be doing in the future, when the stock markets are going wacko and you just lost 20% of your retirement portfolio and your brain's on tilt and you're like, oh, I got to get out. And then you sell out. Well, that was the worst thing you could do right then. And we know from years and years of study that individual investors are poor investors. We under perform the market as a whole, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. But the more you trade, the bigger the gap is. But that's not the problem. The problem is we actually think we're good investors, because like the study in Canada, even we remember, our brain will, oh yeah, I bought Nvidia at whatever and I made all this money, but your brain will sort of filter out all the other things that you did wrong. and convince you, oh, you're doing well, you're a good investor, and the only way to do that is with hard data, where you say, okay, here's how I'm doing, here's what the benchmark is. Hey, if you beat the benchmark consistently, fine, go. You don't need to be watching this podcast, but that's not most people.
David, and when people, leaders learn what you share in the book and they try to apply it in their life, where do they struggle the most on average?
There's a couple things. The first thing is you don't even realize that you're in your own head, because that's how we live our lives. We don't realize that I'm going more and more into my head, and I need to break out. And then we don't really explore far enough how it is to be not us. I'll get people say, so there are 3 dimensions. You can be someone else, like Gordon Moore and Andy Grove did. Be sometime else. So like be your future 6 months in the future. We use that on the submarine a lot, but you can go all the way to the end of your life. Hey, when I'm 80, what do I wish I did right now? Or be sometime else, or somewhere else, which is like a fly on the wall. Hey, if I were in the balcony looking down at me, what would I be thinking like right now? How would I be observing the situation? So I talk to people and they say, oh, I consider the future when I'm making a decision now. Well, that's not quite the same, because what that is I'm in my here and now self. I'm here, I'm now, I'm in my brain, and I'm thinking, if I do this, how is it going to affect me in the future? Well, if that worked, no one would be drinking all these sugary drinks, no one would be smoking, no one would be we'd be saving more for retirement. We'd have all these much better behaviors for the long run. So that only works at a limited level. It's much better to actually transport yourself into the future. Imagine yourself, like, where are you living? What are you wearing? What are you sitting on? What did you have for breakfast? How are you feeling about life? And this is a really hard part. You can sort of imagine, you can use facial, you can use they're super scary. I don't know if you've done it, but you can go in and say, hey, what do I look like 20 years from now? It'll age you. But those things are actually good, because then you say, oh, okay, like I'm not going to be the same. And so you want to inhabit that other experience and then look back at you. And so you see yourself as the other person, not seeing our future self as the other person. And that is a more powerful transformation. It's cognitively more difficult. It requires energy and a deliberate decision to do that. But it helps drop all those filters much more strongly than you just still being you, but saying, oh yeah, I'll consider the future. That's good, but you can do a lot better than that.
David, and out of all the approaches you guys shared in the book, which are each quite powerful, what are your go-to most powerful approaches that you consider the most effective for you?
Yeah, for me, I have 2. One is in be someone else. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to experience my life, I call it like I'm the quarterback of my team. So if you watch American football, it's like the quarterback, I'm calling the plays, the other team's there, and I'm looking through the helmet, and my vision is sort of obscured a little bit. And when one of the big guys on the other team hits me hard, I was like, oh, that happened to me. And so what I try and imagine in these moments is being with the coach. So I'm sitting on the side of the field, and I actually elevate myself like a couple rows up, and I'm looking out, and you get hit hard. Say quarterback gets hit hard, sacked. And the coach is just like, yeah, that hurts. That's going to hurt. And then you come off the field, you're talking to the coach. Well, coach doesn't care. It's like, yeah, okay, so what? What are we going to do next? That's the only thing that matters. And the coach is looking forward, and the coach is being productive in terms of like, what are we going to do? And the coach doesn't have all that emotional reactance connected up with what happened. So I like, what would my coach say if I were my coach right now, what would coach say? That's number one. And then I really like the future, jumping into the future, be sometime else. And we know, for example, when Bezos had to make a decision about whether to start Amazon, he fast forward. He said, "I would imagine when I'm 80, what am I gonna regret?" And what happens is so right now, one of the things we're thinking about is, hey, how long am I going to write books and speak? And I really, just want to hike mountains, but what am I going to do? And should we move to France and have all this? And it seems my brain is framing it as like, oh, it's change. Oh, it's scary. Oh, it's different. Oh, it's like, well, this seems to be working for you. Why would you do something different? But when you're on the far side of the decision and you look back, it frames it like regret. What did I miss? And when you think about it that way, and the other thing is when you're far from something, you just see a lot more clearly. There's a theory called construal level theory, which is when we're far away, either in distance or time, in your brain, you just see the big picture because you visually see the big picture. And when you see the big picture, you see what really matters to you. You get closer to your true why in essence. If you're trying to find out like, well, what's my why? Like, don't be in the nitty gritty, like zoom way out. And you say, well, you know what? Why am I scared of? I can just do that. So that's really good. In operational things like running a company, I think that 6 months is a really good time. Because 6 months makes you think long term, like I've got to really solve the problem once. Or if I solve the problem, I need to build a team of thinkers rather than just being the guy who has all the answers. Because then 6 months from now, you're still going to be, and you're going to be trapped. Because this is how it felt to me. I was always trapped. I couldn't put my cell phone down. I couldn't leave the ship. So be sometime else, and then imagine yourself as coach.
And as you were talking about distancing, seeing the big picture, it reminded me how powerful it is sometimes to go on vacation or even on a work trip and be away, and you start seeing your entire life from a big picture perspective more than when you even try to see it that way when you are in your normal routine at home, work, and so on.
Yeah, that's a great example. I don't go on vacation at the office. I go somewhere or else. So that's a good example. I mean, you've made some big changes in your life, so you must have thought about it, like how. And I don't know if they seem scary to you or what, but for a lot of people, a big change kind of feels scary, and we just keep doing the same thing.
Yet we have to change. We have to grow, because we never really stay still. If we're not growing, we're going the other way.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think this growing and learning attitude is really part of it. But if you're only stuck in like, well, what matters today, every day I have to run the 400 meters as fast as possible, you're never going to grow, because you never do the thing where your body recovers, you relax, you analyze what's really going on here. Can I change my stride? What's my tempo? I need to speed up my leg rotation at the second half of the race. You never do that, because every day it's like, oh, I got to go as fast. We all know that performance kind of goes like this, and you need these little dips. And I go on vacation and I think about it, and I'm kind of sitting on the beach going, And those are really key, insightful moments for people.
We touched a little bit on it today, but I want to ask it as a separate question because it's so critical. Why do so many organizations persist with legacy strategies even when external evidence suggests obsolescence?
Yeah, well, this is exactly the problem that Gordon Moore and Andy Grove had, and many other companies, as you know and suggest. And I think, some people talk about sort of organizational decisions. I don't think teams make decisions. I think individuals make decisions. And it may look like there may be a team there. Well, the board of directors decided, well, yeah, I don't know. But really, the CEO is telling them, So Martin Winterkorn, the CEO of Volkswagen, says we're going to build these diesel engines, and they're going to have good performance and meet all these environmental specs. And the engineers say, well, it's really very difficult to do that. We have to increase costs. No, we can't do that. It's going to stay cheap too. And so basically, and then people say, well, Volkswagen made a decision. Not really. It was individuals making decisions to comply or not comply. And unfortunately, they went along with because he was a bully. So the problem is we identify ourselves with our past success, our past success. So we make film, we do rent videos, we use Betamax, whatever it is. It's kind of obvious in later looking back, and we can kind of joke and chuckle and say, oh, a Blockbuster had a chance to buy Netflix for $50 million way back when, but they didn't, because Blockbuster was here and Netflix was way down here. So it's this identification, and I think it comes at it's a very personal thing. I think of myself, I was always the smart guy growing up. My nickname in high school was Einstein. I wasn't Einstein, but I was a pretty clever person. I was on the math team, and the problem is this kind of bakes into and so you think that. And so when I went to the new Submarine, your brain is like, oh, you're smart, you can figure it out. Even though I only had 2 weeks, and normally you have a year, and you have a year to learn everything. So there's no way. It makes no sense. But your brain is convincing yourself, oh, well, because you're this kind of, because you're ambitious, because you're nice, because you're a good tennis player, whatever it is, that's threatening. When I started speaking, there was no reason why I would be a good public speaker or an author. And I had no ego in it because I never did it before. So my first 100 speeches, I was like, oh yeah, so how'd that go? I was really excited, what can I learn? What can I do better? What should I talk more or less about? And, but then, and I don't really realize, I don't really remember when it happened, but then I started thinking, well, I'm actually pretty good at this. People are giving me this money and I go all over the world and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's beginning of the end when you start thinking that. And I remember talking to Simon Sinek one day in my, so the introduction that they read before you go on stage, it said, submarine captain, expert in leadership. And he's like, well, you should change that and say you were a student of leadership. And I was like, that's genius. And so I changed it. And so now, even so, it's still weird. It's weird though. People still sometimes say, but I say, I'm a student of leadership. I'm a student. And that really refreshed my attitude toward the whole thing. Cause I was going into a place where, oh no, I'm good. Like, what do you know? And it's not good. And things change and technology changes and audiences want shorter, pithier, happier, faster and funnier, whatever, who knows if this audience is different than the last audience. So if you don't have that student mentality, you're going to be right for now. It's like the stopped clock is right twice a day kind of thing. You'll be right. Everything will be fine. And you convince yourself that, and then you'll be wrong and the company will go bankrupt or people will die even worse.
Yes, it's such a dangerous place. I'm so glad that you mentioned it. Then things will happen in life to correct for thinking that you are, you made it, you never need anything, you don't need to learn anything else. And
right.
What do they know? I'm an expert.
Right. Well, how many speeches have you I remember thinking one day, lady was telling me something, and I'm thinking, well, how many speeches did you give last year? But that's dangerous. It's bad thinking. But the thing is, when life gives you those signals, your brain has a 3-step argument for discounting and ignoring those signals. First is, no, that's not right. That didn't happen. She'll say, oh, well, when you said, I say, no, I didn't say that. So 2 is you'll discount the person. Oh, well, how many speeches did you give? What do they know? And then 3 is you kind of get to this point, well, maybe that happened, but I'm still good, or I'm a good human being. And you kind of go, I tried hard. I did the best I could. I was surprised by you guys changed the time at the last, whatever it was. And so there's this 3-phase defense that your brain uses in these situations. And it happens automatically before you can think about it. And there was also a story in a book where the pilots come in and land a plane in San Francisco, and they ended up coming in too low. They were coming in high initially, but they throttled all the way back in the engines, thinking the autopilot was going to control the engines, but it wasn't. And so the plane was it was basically a glide, 777, so not a glider. It was sinking, and there are these lights on the runway that tell you you're high, 4 white lights, and then it goes 3 and 1, 2, 2, 1 and 3, and then 4 red is you're really, really low. And so they were cascading through the sequence very quickly. And the pilot afterwards, the tail hit, broke off. 3 people died. And so the plane's coming in, and they go to these 4 red lights, and the pilot afterwards said he never saw the 4 red lights. Now, the plane, of course, is getting closer and closer to the runway, which is where the lights are. So the lights are getting bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. He saw the 4 white, the 3 1, the 2 2, the 1 and 3. So there's no reason, there's no physiological reason why he wouldn't have seen 4 red. But he was being evaluated. It was his first flight on the 777. So, okay, remember, that pushes us in immersed. Our brain is your brain wants to pass the evaluation, wants to think good. Top pilots had previously talked about, if you get to 4 red, you're probably going to fail your evaluation because that means you're too far off track. So in his brain, he's worried about failing the evaluation, not crashing an airplane with almost 300 people on board. That's what your brain is doing in that immersed state. And so it filters. It literally, I think it's a case where the brain just blocked the image from your consciousness. And that's a dramatic example, but this happens all the time in small ways. Just like, I'll just dial that volume down a little bit. That's bad news. I'll dial that down. Oh, that's good news. I'll dial that up. And so you get this distorted, we call it a curated reality. The reality that you think you see, which is so true, and this is exactly fact, and the way it is, it's not. It's curated by your brain with the objective of making you feel good about everything you did in the past. This is the core reason why we hang on to all that legacy stuff that made us successful in the past, because our brain is convincing us that's the path forward.
David, I want to wrap up. Unfortunately, we have only a few minutes left.
Yeah.
And such an important discussion, but limited time. So I want to wrap up with my 2 favorite questions.
Okay.
1 or 2, depending on if we will have time. So the first one is, over your entire lifetime, what were 2, 3 aha moments, realizations that you feel comfortable sharing, or even one that really changed the way you look at life or the way you look at business?
Well, certainly one was when I ended up giving an order on the submarine, and the crew tried to follow. The officer gave the order, and it was a bad order. It was an order you couldn't do. It was like shifting into second gear on an engine with only had 1 gear. And I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, that I knew it was wrong, but you told me to do it." And it was just like a giant hammer hitting my head, because my whole life was about being right, giving orders, and getting the team to do it. And it was just totally fell apart at that part. I also had, and then at the end of my Navy career, I had a health scare, and I had the doctor. I had a problem with my heart, and doctor said, "Well, look at this table. It'll tell you what your life expectancy is." He wouldn't tell me the number, and I look it up, and based on my age and my weight and how well my heart was running, my life expectancy was 7 years. And this was 15 years ago. And I was like, fuck, I don't want that. I want to see my kids get married and graduate from college, and it just seemed like at that moment, everything that we think is so important really wasn't all that important. And we get so excited about little tiny things that don't matter. And like someone in the airplane knocked their drink over, and it was tomato juice, and it lands on my leg. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, that's fine. We're a crowded place. Things happen. And it's just like, none of that stuff matters. And when these things happen, and I kind of got through that, and I got medication and exercise, and I'm living forever now. But I just try to keep remembering, like, what's really important, and what is it that my brain is telling me is important right now, but it's not really that important, and live your life like that.
And I'm so sorry that you had to go through it, and I'm so glad that you're okay now.
It was freaking scary. I remember lying with my head on the pillow. You know, when you're trying to go to sleep and you can hear your heart go thump, 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 thump. And I was just like, oh, please don't quit on me in the middle of the night. I really want to wake up tomorrow morning and have a cup of coffee. I guess the coffee's big for me.
Yes, in those moments you really see life so differently. It happened to me a few times as well. In a big way, 2 times. Every time it really just changes a lot for you.
It's a big reset.
I feel that in my experience also it happens when you kind of heading in the wrong direction a little bit in life.
It's possible. I was in a terrible job, in a terrible situation, and I needed to get out of it. And I had to, because I was medically not fit to keep going what I was doing. So maybe that was, and then I ended up writing the book, which changed my life and has helped a lot of people.
Last question for today. If you could instill one belief in the heart of every listener right now, what would it be?
I think a book that really struck me hard was Carol Dweck's Mindset book, where she crystallizes this idea that we tend to be we have this performance mindset. I need to do this. We go to, and it's coded in our language. We go to work to do our jobs. We want to get things done. We don't talk about we go to work to think our job, and but we know as humans, we love solving problems. You're on the subway and everyone's doing little games on their phones. We're solving problems. And I think this idea that if you jump out and say, well, what about 6 months from now? It's just like, be more in the future. What am I going to want? Well, I'm going to want it to be better at this than I am now. And so you go into things, and getting things done is important. So I always think 2 vectors. So there's getting it done, but then there's the learning, or building the team, building the capacity to get it done. And we tend to neglect this vector. And so it's the growth vector. And so I always want to invest in whatever activity. I always want to say, okay, now am I really deeply in performance mode, or I'm going to learn? So I have this curious, childlike curiosity. What's going to happen? How's it going to feel? I forgot my water bottles on a bike ride a couple of months ago. And I was initially really irritated myself, and I'm in Florida, so it's really hot. So you lose a lot of fluid, and you get and I was thinking about, well, maybe I just go home, screw it. And then I said, nah, this will be an interesting experiment. I'm going to see what it's like to ride for 2 hours hard in the Florida heat without water. I'm going to sort of just be really aware of what's going on with my body, and how does it feel? What's my power? How's my power reacting? And that kind of made it, like, that changed the whole experience. That was fun. It was interesting. I wouldn't recommend it because it didn't do well, but in my brain, it just changed it from being stress and anger and mad to, hey, let's see what happens.
Yes, it's so important to change perspective in a situation like that.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the person that you are. Thank you for all the work you have done for your country, for our country. And such a pleasure to spend this hour with you. Where can our listeners learn more about you, buy your book, anything you want to share?
Yeah, my website's davidmarquet.com, and I have a page that talks about my books with links to all the booksellers to buy the book. And I have a YouTube channel called Leadership Nudges, where I make these I try and make them short, like 60 to 90 seconds. It's just a little tiny tip like that. Some of the things we talked about, like yellow card me, or when someone brings you a problem, don't solve their problem. Have them work at least for 30 seconds on solving it themselves, and ask questions like, if you were me, what would you do? If you were the board, if you were your kids, if you were your replacement, get them out of their heads by asking these questions. Don't solve the problem. Don't say, oh, did you think about safety? Did you think about the client? That is an annoying way to do it. Don't do that. Just get them out of their head. And so YouTube channel, it's called Leadership Nudges. And then I'm on LinkedIn. So connect on LinkedIn, say hi, and say you watched the show, and tell me a little bit about what you're doing, what you guys are doing.
Thank you, David, again.
Cheers.
Our guests today again have been David Marquet. Check out the book he co-authored with Mike Gillespie. It's called Distancing. And our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It's a free download, and you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. You can also get McKinsey and BCG winning resume, which is a resume that got offers from both of those firms. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connect with you all next time.